Princess Lyra stared out of the enormous observation window, watching the swirling gas clouds of the giant planet below. The palace hung above the stormy atmosphere like a jewel suspended in the void. Its towers shimmered with energy, and the alien banners fluttered silently in the artificial winds generated by the stabilization thrusters. From this height, the world seemed impossibly beautiful. But the princess did not see beauty. She saw judgment, expectation, and the walls of a prison made of etiquette and power. The palace council had gathered that morning to discuss her future. As always, the discussion turned to her marriage. Lyra's paralysis from a childhood accident had long ago made her the subject of pity among the alien aristocracy. They had no interest in her mind, her cunning, or her potential. To them, she was fragile, incapable, and politically inconvenient. Whispers floated through the halls like venomous ghosts, suggesting she be wed to a human ambassador, as if humans were toys to be traded across the stars. Lyra's eyes narrowed. They did not see what she saw. They could not understand that her paralysis had forced her to train her mind to sharpen like a blade. While others ran and fought and flaunted their physical prowess, she had studied every detail of their technology, every nuance of alien diplomacy, every weakness hidden beneath centuries of arrogance. She knew that underestimating her was the gravest mistake anyone could make. When the announcement came that she would be married to Captain Elias of Earth, the council spoke with detached satisfaction. To them, it was a convenient arrangement, an unimportant human paired with a useless princess. She was expected to accept her role quietly, smile politely at the council, and remain the passive figurehead they could discard at any moment. Lyra did not smile. The day Elias arrived, the palace's landing platform shimmered with energy shields as his ship touched down. Unlike the alien vessels, sleek and imposing, his ship was simple, designed for functionality rather than ceremony. The contrast alone made her curious. Maybe humans were not as primitive as the council assumed. He stepped out of his ship with an air of cautious confidence. His uniform was neat, but understated, his eyes scanning the palace with careful attention. When he finally looked at her, Lyra felt a flicker of recognition in his gaze, a mix of respect and uncertainty. He did not pity her, and that alone was unusual. "Princess Lyra," he said, bowing slightly. "I am Captain Elias of Earth. I have been sent to serve as your partner in this arrangement." Lyra studied him, noting his posture, the steadiness of his voice, and the way his eyes followed her movements without a hint of judgment. He was human, yes, but there was something in him that suggested he was more than the council's impression of a weak race. "I am aware of your title, Captain," Lyra replied, her voice calm but firm. "Titles mean little if one cannot understand their purpose." She paused, letting the words settle. "You will find that I do not fit the expectations of those who underestimate me." Elias blinked, momentarily caught off guard, then smiled faintly. "I do not underestimate anyone, Princess. I have learned that appearances can be deceptive." That simple exchange left the council frowning from behind their screens. They had expected fear, submission, or at least hesitation. They got none. Lyra had made it clear from the first moment that she was not a victim to be pitied. The first days of their union were formal, filled with ceremonies and alien traditions. Lyra endured them with patience, using the time to observe Elias. He was not the strong warrior the council had expected. He did not command fleets or issue edicts with alien precision. But he asked questions, listened carefully, and adapted quickly. When she explained alien customs, he grasped them with an ease that impressed her. It was rare to find someone who could understand without condescension, and she valued it. Alone in her private chambers, Lyra began to teach him in secret. She displayed holographic schematics of the palace, pointing out security systems, energy grids, and hidden passages. Elias absorbed the information quickly, sometimes asking questions she had not anticipated, and she found herself smiling despite the situation. The human might be underestimated by others, but he had potential. and she had always been skilled at spotting potential before others could. One evening, as the twin moons of the gas giant glowed outside the palace window, Lyra and Elias sat in quiet conversation. The council's whispers had not reached them here, in the sanctuary of her chambers. She showed him a model of the energy shield generators that protected the palace. "These systems are more than defense," she said. "They are a web of control. The council relies on them to monitor every visitor, every movement, every word spoken. They trust the technology more than the loyalty of those around them." Elias leaned forward, studying the holograms with intensity. "And you want to use this to your advantage?" Lyra's eyes glinted. "Not just me." "Humans are often dismissed as weak. The council assumes you cannot challenge them. But intelligence, adaptability, and creativity are not weaknesses. They are weapons. I intend to show them exactly how underestimated we are." Their collaboration grew. Day by day, Lyra revealed more of the palace's secrets, and Elias demonstrated that human ingenuity could complement her strategies. They began mapping the weaknesses in alien protocols, the hidden rivalries between noble houses, and the blind spots in security that the council assumed were foolproof. Yet outside the walls of her chambers, the palace remained a place of tension and judgment. The council held private meetings to discuss her behavior, puzzled and angered by her defiance. One council member, a tall alien with translucent skin that shimmered in the light, voiced his frustration openly. She should be compliant. She should accept her limitations. Why does she seek to control what she cannot command? Another member shook his head. She is not what we expected. She is clever and dangerous in ways we do not understand. Perhaps we miscalculated by pairing her with a human. Perhaps it is the humans who will now hold the advantage. Lyra, of course, was already aware of these discussions. The palace systems whispered every conversation to her sensors, and she used the knowledge to her benefit. She learned which council members could be manipulated, which ones were swayed by flattery, and which ones relied entirely on fear to maintain authority. Meanwhile, Elias began to see the magnitude of what they faced. Humans had long been dismissed in galactic politics, considered weak and expendable. Yet here, within the orbit of this alien world, he witnessed firsthand the power of a mind unbound by prejudice and a race underestimated at every turn. Together they formed a silent alliance that neither the council nor the palace staff fully understood. One night, as Lyra moved her wheelchair toward the observation window, she reflected on the irony of her situation. She had been deemed useless, unfit to marry, and incapable of influencing events. Yet in her mind, she controlled the flow of information, the strategies that could destabilize the council, and the insights that could elevate a human to a position of respect across the galaxy. Elias joined her, placing a hand on the arm of her chair. "You see possibilities everywhere," he said quietly, "and you make me see them too. I had no idea humans could be this underestimated and yet so capable." Lyra smiled, a rare expression of warmth. "They always are, and now we can show them. Not through force, not through spectacle, but through intellect, strategy, and persistence. They may dismiss us, but they cannot dismiss what we can do together." The twin moons rose higher, casting silvery light across the palace towers. Outside, the storms of the gas giant raged, indifferent to politics or ambition. Within the palace, however, a quiet storm was building, one of subtle rebellion, careful planning, and the assertion of human potential through a paralyzed princess who refused to be ignored. By the end of the first week, the council had begun to sense that something was shifting. Small failures in protocol, unusual coordination between Lyra and Elias, and a sudden ability for the human to navigate palace systems with uncanny insight all raised alarms. Yet no one could predict the full extent of what was coming, for they did not understand the combination of human adaptability and Lyra's brilliance. The first part of their journey had ended, not with grand declarations or battles, but with the quiet formation of a partnership that would challenge the very foundations of alien arrogance. Princess Lyra, underestimated, dismissed, and constrained by her body, had begun to show that power does not always reside in strength alone. Sometimes, the mind, when trained and determined, can rewrite the rules of the galaxy. And somewhere in the heart of the palace, as systems hummed and lights shimmered across the towers, Lyra and Elias began to plan the next steps of their quiet rebellion, unaware of the storms of resistance they would soon face, and ready to prove that no alien could truly control a human or a princess whose will refused to be bound. The days passed quietly, yet the palace buzzed with an invisible tension. To the alien aristocracy, everything seemed normal. The princess appeared polite, the human envoy behaved respectfully, and the palace routines flowed as expected. But beneath the surface, a subtle revolution was taking shape. Lyra had begun teaching Elias the hidden ways of the palace, the secret corridors, the overlooked communication systems, and the intricate protocols the council relied upon to maintain control. She explained each detail with precision, ensuring that the human understood the nuances that most aliens would assume were obvious. Elias absorbed it all with eagerness. Unlike the aliens who were rigid and proud, humans could adapt. They could see patterns where others saw only hierarchy. He learned quickly, and Lyra was impressed. Even more, she realized that his presence was more than just a political formality. He was a variable the council had not anticipated. One afternoon, they were alone in her chambers, the pale light of the gas giant's twin moons spilling across the floor. Lyra gestured to a holographic map of the palace. This wing is primarily ceremonial, but it contains systems that control much of the palace security. Every corridor, every camera, every sensor feeds into a central node. Most nobles never even look at the maps because they assume obedience from their subordinates. Elias leaned forward, tracing the pathways with his finger. "And you can manipulate them?" Lyra smiled faintly. "I can redirect the data, make false readings, create blind spots. It is subtle, but enough to gain an advantage when needed. Knowledge is a weapon the council cannot touch directly." For Elias, it was thrilling. Humans had often been dismissed as weak, but here was proof that intellect could match or even surpass brute strength, and the princess who taught him was not only brilliant but fiercely determined. Her disability did not make her weak. It made her meticulous, cautious, and far more observant than any agile noble could be. Their cooperation deepened. Each night, they met to plan small exercises, testing Elias's understanding and their combined ability to anticipate palace routines. They simulated emergencies, created secret signals, and explored vulnerabilities the council would never expect anyone to notice. Lyra explained that control was an illusion. "Those who rely only on strength or status," she said, "are blind to the subtle movements of strategy. They assume compliance because no one challenges them in ways they cannot perceive." Meanwhile, whispers in the council chambers began to reflect unease. Some nobles noted unusual discrepancies, food deliveries appearing in the wrong places, security reports that contradicted one another, and minor miscommunications between palace staff. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to raise concern. The council had assumed that the human and the paralyzed princess could never pose a threat. They had assumed wrong. One morning, a council member confronted her, a tall alien with translucent skin that reflected light like glass. He spoke with forced patience. "Princess Lyra, we have observed inconsistencies in your management of the palace systems. This is unacceptable." Lyra's gaze remained calm. "I assure you, all systems function as they should. Any errors you perceive are likely misinterpretations of data." She leaned slightly forward, her eyes fixed on him. "I manage these systems daily. I would suggest caution before making accusations based on incomplete information." The alien's jaw tightened. "You do not understand the consequences of failure. Humans are insufficient, and yet you rely upon them. Lyra's voice did not rise, but it carried authority. Do not dismiss what you do not understand. Humans are capable of ingenuity, adaptability, and creativity. I will continue to work with Captain Elias because he is reliable, intelligent, and observant. His presence does not weaken this palace, it strengthens it. The alien faltered, unused to being spoken to with such directness. He left without further protest, though his expression betrayed unease. Lyra knew that subtle victories like these would accumulate over time, and she was patient. Patience was a tool far sharper than brute force. In her private chambers, Lyra and Elias continued their study. One night she shared a secret that had been carefully hidden from all but a few palace aides, an ancient library containing blueprints of alien technologies from centuries past. Weapons, energy systems, and experimental devices lay within, many of which had been abandoned or forgotten. Lyra had spent years studying them, mastering what the Council dismissed as irrelevant. These technologies could change the balance of power, she explained, her voice low and urgent. If used wisely, we could demonstrate that humans are not the weak species they believe. Elias studied the schematics, his mind racing. If humans can understand and adapt these systems, we could gain credibility in ways the Council never imagined, but it would require careful planning. Lyra nodded. Planning is everything. We must be subtle, influence without detection, knowledge without arrogance. The Council thrives on fear and appearances. If we act too openly, they will crush us. But if we act strategically, we can bend their perception, and they will never know what hit them. The following weeks were spent in quiet preparation. Lyra began teaching Elias the intricacies of alien culture, their language, their etiquette, and the hidden rules of diplomacy that governed every interaction. Elias excelled, quickly learning nuances that had taken aliens decades to master. Together they practiced subtle manipulations, how to redirect servants without detection, how to prompt council members into predictable arguments, how to use palace protocols to create opportunities. One evening during a council banquet, their practice paid off. A minor dispute broke out over the allocation of resources, and Lyra subtly intervened, steering the conversation so that a rival noble revealed a hidden weakness. The council did not realize the extent of her manipulation, but Elias did. He was beginning to understand the depth of her brilliance, and his respect for her grew each day. Outside, the palace guards and aides began to notice small changes. Staff who had once assumed humans were inconsequential now treated Elias with a mixture of caution and curiosity. Subtle signs of respect began to appear where there had been none before. It was a small victory, but in Lyra's eyes it was the beginning of a larger transformation. Lyra often reflected on the irony of her situation. She had been deemed unfit for marriage, dismissed by her peers, and overlooked by history. Yet here she was, guiding a human to understanding, manipulating the palace systems, and quietly undermining the arrogance of centuries of alien tradition. Her body had limitations, but her mind had none. Every observation, every calculation, every plan she made gave her a freedom the council could not comprehend. Elias, too, began to change. At first he had been cautious, unsure of his role and wary of alien traditions, but under Lyra's guidance he became confident. Using human ingenuity to complement her strategic brilliance, he created small tools, adapted systems, and suggested approaches Lyra had not considered. Their partnership was becoming more than teacher and student. It was collaboration, and the council's assumptions were slowly being shattered. One night, as the moons cast pale light across the palace corridors, Lyra spoke of her ultimate goal. The council believes they control everything because they rely on fear and appearances, but the truth is that perception is fragile. If we can show them that humans are not weak, that we are capable of insight, innovation, and influence, we change not only this palace, but the perception of our species across the galaxy. Elias listened, absorbing the weight of her words. And you believe we can do it? Lyra's gaze was steady. We must, and we will. Not through overt force, but through intelligence, patience, and understanding. They will never see us as threats until it is too late. The weeks turned into months. Lyra and Elias moved quietly, mastering the palace's hidden systems and studying the weaknesses of the council. Small victories accumulated. A misreported resource allocation here, a subtly exposed rivalry there, a council member misled by carefully planted information. Each success strengthened their confidence. Each subtle manipulation eroded the council's sense of invincibility. Yet Lyra remained cautious. She knew that patience was essential. The council was arrogant, but it was also powerful. One misstep could expose their plans, and the consequences would be severe. But the princess, paralyzed yet unstoppable in mind, and the human, who learned faster than anyone could predict, were careful, meticulous, and unyielding. One evening, as the palace lights shimmered across the towers and the storms of the gas giant raged below, Lyra and Elias stood at the observation window. They had come far since their first meeting, yet neither spoke of triumph. Instead, they shared understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of the potential they had discovered together. Lyra's voice was soft but firm. They wanted to discard me, to see me as weak and incapable. They wanted to dismiss humans as irrelevant, yet here we are, quiet, patient, and underestimated. That is our advantage. They cannot fight what they do not understand.
Elias nodded. Then we continue, Princess.
Step by step, quietly, until the council realizes they misjudged us entirely. Outside, the palace remained a symbol of alien power, shining above the swirling storms. Inside, a quiet revolution had begun. The paralyzed princess and the underestimated human were not only surviving, they were learning, teaching, and quietly asserting the strength of intellect, patience, and strategy. The first stage of their partnership had ended. They had built trust, understanding, and capability. The council believed they controlled the situation, but they were already being outmaneuvered in ways they could not perceive. And as Lyra reflected, she knew that the real challenges lay ahead. The galaxy beyond the palace walls was vast, full of prejudice, fear, and underestimation, but she and Elias were ready. Together they would show that humans were far more than the council ever imagined, and that even a princess confined to a chair could shape the future of worlds. Months had passed since Lyra and Elias began their quiet work within the palace. What had started as careful observation and subtle testing of systems had evolved into full strategic planning. They were no longer merely learning and teaching. They were preparing for the moment when the council's arrogance would finally meet. Human ingenuity, Lyra's mind unbound by her physical limitations, moved faster than anyone else's in the palace. Every detail mattered. Every pattern held meaning, and every council member's weakness had already been noted and catalogued. One morning, while reviewing holographic schematics of the palace security, Lyra discovered something unexpected. Hidden deep within the oldest archives of the palace lay plans for a series of energy weapons capable of mass destruction. They were unfinished, abandoned centuries ago, but the council had retained the blueprints for fear that anyone outside the palace might gain access to them. The implications were chilling. If the council activated these systems, humans would stand little chance against such technology. Elias leaned closer, his eyes scanning the floating diagrams. This is far beyond what anyone expected. If they rebuild it, Earth would be at risk. Lyra's expression hardened, and that is exactly why we cannot wait. We must understand these systems and prepare countermeasures. We are being underestimated, but that is our advantage. If the council believes humans are weak, they will not anticipate what we can do when we act strategically. They began studying the ancient technology in secret, using the palace's private research chambers and the hidden archives. Lyra had already memorized most of the schematics, but Elias brought a fresh perspective, offering solutions she had not considered. The collaboration was seamless. Each night they tested simulations, adjusting protocols and predicting how the council might react if humans attempted to gain knowledge of the weapons. It was meticulous work, requiring patience and precision. Meanwhile, tension in the palace grew in ways the council did not notice. Small incidents that had once been overlooked began to appear intentional. Supplies were misdirected, minor communications contradicted one another, and certain nobles began to act suspiciously toward each other. Lyra and Elias did not interfere openly. They simply nudged events, using the weaknesses and rivalries of the alien aristocracy to destabilize their confidence. Every small victory was a step closer to their larger goal. One afternoon, an unexpected ally emerged. A disgraced alien scientist named Varel, who had once been exiled for questioning the Council's methods, approached Lyra in secret. He had heard rumors of her intelligence and Elias's human ingenuity, and offered information that could prove invaluable. "You see the palace as I once did," Varel said quietly. "You understand its systems, its weaknesses. Together, we could change how this council operates. I have knowledge they would never allow to be used otherwise." Lyra considered him carefully. Trust was a precious commodity in the palace, and betrayal was never far from the minds of the nobles. Yet something in Varel's demeanor convinced her. He was meticulous, careful, and intelligent, a potential asset in their growing effort. She agreed to his assistance, and together they expanded the reach of their knowledge. The palace grew restless. Rumors of Lyra's unusual activity began to circulate, though no one could prove anything. Council members whispered among themselves, debating whether the princess and the human had overstepped boundaries. "She is clever," one alien muttered. "Too clever." And the human? He adapts faster than anyone could predict. We may have underestimated them both. Lyra, of course, was aware of every word. She recorded the conversations through subtle monitoring systems, storing the knowledge for later use. Knowledge, she understood, was the most powerful weapon of all. The Council's arrogance blinded them to the growing storm they had unwittingly allowed into their palace. As weeks passed, Lyra and Elias began implementing more active measures. They created decoys within the palace communication network, feeding selective information to the Council to provoke predictable responses. Certain Council members began to make decisions that undermined their own authority, while others acted out of fear or jealousy. Every movement was carefully observed, catalogued, and used to reinforce their strategy. One night, as they pored over the holographic schematics of the energy weapons, Elias asked, "Do you think the Council suspects what we're doing?" Lyra shook her head. "They cannot suspect what they cannot comprehend. They have spent centuries relying on obedience, strength, and status. They have never faced strategy executed with intelligence and patience. That is why humans are underestimated. That is why we have the advantage." Their collaboration grew beyond strategy into innovation. Using Varel's knowledge and their own insights, they began to adapt the ancient blueprints for defense rather than offense. They created simulations showing how humans could counteract or neutralize the weapons if activated. It was painstaking work, requiring ingenuity and caution. Every mistake could reveal their plans and invite retaliation. But both Lyra and Elias understood the stakes. The palace, for all its grandeur, had become a battlefield of intellect. The Council remained unaware that the underestimation of a paralyzed princess and a human envoy was allowing them to learn, plan, and adapt at a pace that would eventually surpass the authority of centuries-old traditions. One evening, during a rare moment of quiet, Lyra reflected on how far they had come. When she first met Elias, the Council had expected fear, submission, or dependence. Instead, they had formed a partnership. Elias had grown from an uncertain envoy into a skilled strategist, capable of anticipating the Council's moves and responding with ingenuity. Together, they had learned the palace's secrets, exploited its weaknesses, and gained the quiet respect of a few observant aides who now looked to them as figures of competence. Lyra's thoughts turned to the humans she represented. The Council believed that humans were insignificant, weak, and unworthy of notice. Yet she saw potential everywhere. Creativity, adaptability, and intelligence, traits the council had ignored, were qualities humans excelled at. And if the council dismissed them, it was only a matter of time before humans proved that underestimation was a grave mistake. Their first real test came when the council decided to inspect the archives. They intended to review the ancient blueprints, unaware that Lyra and Elias had already anticipated this move. Using their hidden knowledge and subtle manipulations, they ensured that the council would see only incomplete or misleading information. When the council members were presented with the schematics, they scoffed at the supposed lack of progress. Lyra and Elias observed quietly, controlling the flow of information while remaining undetected. "This palace relies on their assumptions," Lyra whispered to Elias. "They assume we cannot act. They assume we do not understand. Every misstep we guide them toward strengthens our position." Elias nodded. "It is impressive. You have turned their arrogance into our advantage." Lyra's smile was faint but confident. "And it is only the beginning. Once they believe they are in control, the true work begins. The council cannot see the storm forming beneath their feet, and that is our greatest strength." As the days continued, subtle rebellions emerged among the palace staff. Guided by Lyra and Elias, the servants and aides began noticing the inconsistencies in council orders. They acted carefully, never openly defying authority but quietly assisting the princess and the human envoy when opportunities arose. The council remained blind, interpreting every small change as random error rather than orchestrated strategy. Then came the most critical discovery: a council plan to weaponize the energy systems against Earth. The humans had assumed the aliens would never act directly, yet the blueprints revealed the potential for devastating attacks. The council intended to maintain dominance by ensuring humans remained weak and fearful. Lyra's mind raced. She realized that the stakes had grown far beyond the palace. If she and Elias failed, Earth could face destruction. "We cannot wait any longer," she told Elias. "The council's arrogance has gone too far. They underestimate humans and they underestimate me. If we do not act, the consequences will be catastrophic." Then we act. But carefully. We cannot let them detect what we are doing until it is too late. They began formulating plans to counteract the potential weaponization of the energy systems. Using simulations and covert communication with human engineers, they explored every possible approach, every contingency. Lyra's wheelchair no longer symbolized limitation. It represented a command center from which strategy, precision, and intellect flowed without restraint. In the quiet moments, Lyra reflected on her own journey. She had been dismissed as incapable, paralyzed, and politically irrelevant. Yet here she was, guiding a human, outmaneuvering an entire council, and preparing to protect her planet from a threat the council did not even realize existed. She felt no bitterness, only clarity. Intelligence, patience, and understanding were her weapons, and she wielded them without hesitation. As the moons of the gas giant cast their silvery light over the palace, Lyra and Elias prepared for the next stage. The council's secrets had been uncovered, weaknesses identified, and allies recruited. The time for quiet observation was ending. The time for strategic action was approaching. Lyra knew that the true challenge lay ahead. The council would soon realize that their assumptions were wrong. Humans were not weak. She was not powerless. And when the council discovered the depth of their oversight, it would be too late. For now, they watched, planned, and waited. Every day they grew stronger, smarter, and more prepared. The paralyzed princess and the underestimated human had become a force the council could not see. A quiet storm of intellect and strategy rising beneath the surface of the palace. And when that storm finally broke, the galaxy would witness the power of underestimation and the brilliance of humans who refused to be dismissed. The palace had grown tense over the past weeks, though most of the council remained unaware of the quiet storm gathering within its walls. Lyra and Elias had spent countless hours studying the ancient energy systems, coordinating with human engineers, and planning the first moves of their rebellion. Every detail mattered, every minor disruption was deliberate, and every noble misstep was recorded. The underestimation of the paralyzed princess and the human envoy had become the Council's fatal flaw. The night of the first stage arrived. The palace was alive with ceremonial lights and music, celebrating the anniversary of the planet's unification. The Council expected order, submission, and adherence to tradition. They did not expect Lyra to act. She wheeled herself through the corridors, calm and deliberate, her eyes scanning every hallway, every security node, every servant quietly following their routines. Elias trailed behind, carrying a tablet of encrypted communications from Earth, ready to execute the plans they had spent months perfecting. Lyra's first move was subtle. She initiated a series of system reroutes, creating controlled anomalies within the palace's monitoring network. Certain corridors appeared empty when they were occupied. Security cameras showed false readings. Doors locked and unlocked without explanation. The Council noticed the glitches but assumed they were minor errors. They did not suspect manipulation. "Subtlety is everything," Lyra whispered to Elias as they passed through a side corridor that led to the palace archives. "The moment we reveal our full strength, they will counterattack. For now, we appear as quiet observers." Elias nodded, his mind alert. "The anomalies will confuse them enough to give us the advantage." Within the council chambers, the nobles began to sense unease. Reports of inconsistencies had multiplied. Resources were misallocated, messages contradicted one another, and certain security alerts had no explanation. The councilors argued, blaming each other, unaware that the cause of their frustration was neither accident nor human error, but the deliberate orchestration of the princess and her ally. Lyra smiled faintly as she observed the chaos from the shadows of the hallway. Years of underestimation had blinded the council to the possibility that a paralyzed princess and a human could act with such precision. The palace, a symbol of centuries-old power, was now subtly bending to her control. Their next step involved the ancient energy systems. Lyra wheeled herself into the deepest chamber of the archives, where the blueprints and prototype models lay stored. Elias followed, carefully accessing the encrypted human communication channels. The plan was clear: neutralize the weapon systems before the Council could weaponize them against Earth. Lyra had studied every detail, and Elias's human ingenuity provided solutions for adapting ancient alien technology. "This is the moment," Lyra said quietly. "If we fail, the Council may detect our manipulation. If we succeed, we gain leverage that cannot be challenged." Working together, they began the delicate task of reconfiguring the energy networks. Lyra directed the changes, precise and deliberate, while Elias implemented the modifications, using the tools they had prepared. Each step was calculated to appear as a routine update, unnoticed by the Council and hidden within the palace systems. The complexity was immense, but their combined intellect made it achievable. As the hours passed, small alarms triggered across the palace. Minor lights flickered, doors sealed unexpectedly, and communication channels briefly went silent. Servants moved cautiously, unsure of what had caused the disturbances. The Council, observing from their chambers, grew anxious. "This is impossible," one counselor whispered. "The systems are failing in ways we do not understand." Lyra observed the Council's confusion with satisfaction. Every moment of panic strengthened their position. "Do not underestimate the value of control," she told Elias. "They assume technology is infallible. We have shown them it is not." With the palace systems partially under their influence, Lyra and Elias began coordinating with their allies among the staff. Certain aides, already aware of their plans, subtly assisted them, directing nobles into missteps or providing information on their movements. The Council remained unaware of the network of quiet support forming around the princess and the human envoy. Then came the decisive move. Using the rerouted systems, Lyra manipulated the palace surveillance to create a false report. One of the council members was allegedly planning to seize control of the energy systems to launch an unauthorized attack on a neighboring planet. The accusation spread quickly, causing immediate distrust and conflict among the nobles. Each councillor began suspecting the others, and arguments erupted, undermining their unity. Elias watched as the plan unfolded. "They're turning on each other," he said, impressed. "Everything we predicted is happening." Lyra's eyes gleamed. Perception is reality. If they believe they are under threat from one another, their judgment fails. And when judgment fails, opportunity arises. With the council distracted by internal conflict, Lyra and Elias moved to secure the final stages of their plan. They activated the modifications to the energy systems, ensuring that any attempt to weaponize them against Earth would fail. At the same time, they implemented safeguards that allowed selective control, giving them leverage over the council should open confrontation become necessary. The palace had never experienced such a quiet upheaval. The council, previously unified in arrogance and authority, was now fractured and vulnerable. Servants and aides who had once moved cautiously now acted with subtle confidence, guided by the princess and her human ally. The underestimation of both humans and the paralyzed princess had created the perfect conditions for a shift in power. Lyra paused, wheeling herself toward the observation window that overlooked the swirling gas giant below. The moons cast pale light across the palace towers, and she allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. Every plan executed flawlessly, every weakness exploited, every council member subtly manipulated. Everything had gone according to their design. Elias approached, carrying a tablet with updates from Earth. "The modifications are secure. The humans have confirmed the countermeasures will hold if the council attempts activation. We've done it." Lyra smiled faintly.
We have, but this is only the beginning.
"The council may still recover, may still retaliate. We must remain vigilant. Intelligence and strategy are only useful if we continue to apply them." The following days brought subtle shifts in the palace dynamics. Certain council members, confused and suspicious of one another, began making errors in judgment that allowed Lyra and Elias to consolidate their influence further. Alliances that had seemed unbreakable crumbled under the weight of mistrust. The palace, a symbol of unshakable authority, had become a chessboard, and the princess and the human envoy were controlling the pieces. At one point, a council member attempted to confront Lyra directly. He stormed into her chambers, voice sharp and accusing. "Princess, what is happening in this palace? Systems fail, orders are ignored, and you seem complicit in every disruption." Lyra regarded him calmly, her tone firm. "I am responsible for nothing beyond my own duties. If errors exist, they are consequences of your assumptions and your failures. You underestimated humans, you underestimated me, and now you face the results of that oversight." The counselor recoiled, unable to argue further. For the first time, the power dynamic had shifted. The princess, once dismissed, now commanded authority not through physical strength, but through intellect, strategy, and the careful orchestration of events. Elias watched silently from the corner, noting the counselor's stunned expression. They're realizing, finally, that underestimation has consequences. Lyra nodded. "And the galaxy will learn as well. Humans may be dismissed, but we are capable of shaping events in ways no anticipates. That lesson begins here." Over the following weeks, Lyra and Elias continued their careful actions, expanding the network of allies within the palace, refining their control over the systems, and preparing for the next phase, the council's complete inability to maintain authority. Every subtle manipulation, every calculated misstep, was moving them closer to a full-scale demonstration of human ingenuity and strategic brilliance. The first stage of their coup was complete. The council's trust in their own control had eroded. The palace systems were secured, and Earth's safety was guaranteed in the event of any impulsive council action. Lyra had proven that intelligence, patience, and strategy could overcome centuries of arrogance and the physical limitations the council had once believed defined her. As night fell over the gas giant, Lyra and Elias sat together in the quiet of her chambers, the hum of the palace around them. "We have done well," Elias said, his voice filled with admiration. "But the council will recover. They will suspect. They will try to regain control." Lyra's eyes were steady, resolute. "Let them try. Underestimation is their greatest weakness. They do not see what humans can do, nor do they see the strength that comes from intellect and strategy. Every move we make strengthens our position, and when the time comes, they will have no choice but to acknowledge it." Elias nodded. "Then we continue, step by step, until the council cannot resist, until they see the power they ignored for so long." Lyra wheeled herself toward the observation window once more. The stormy clouds of the gas giant swirled endlessly, vast and indifferent. But within the palace, a storm of strategy, intelligence, and human ingenuity had been born. The paralyzed princess and her human ally had shown that true power did not always reside in strength, fear, or tradition. It resided in understanding, planning, and the courage to act when others assumed they were insignificant. And the council, blinded by arrogance, had yet to see the full extent of the storm heading toward them. The palace was quiet that morning, though the tension was almost tangible. The council, fractured and uncertain, moved through their duties with a nervous precision. The subtle manipulations, the carefully orchestrated disruptions, and the hidden strategies of the paralyzed princess and the human envoy had shaken centuries of tradition. What had begun as small anomalies had grown into a full-scale collapse of authority among the alien aristocracy. Yet, Lyra and Elias knew this was not the time for celebration. The final phase required precision, courage, and complete control of the palace systems. Lyra wheeled herself to the observation window, gazing at the stormy clouds of the gas giant below, the swirling colors reflected in her eyes, and she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. This palace had been a prison, defined by arrogance and hierarchy. The council had treated her as incapable, Elias as insignificant, and humans as a weak species. Both of them had proven, through patience and intelligence, that underestimation was a dangerous mistake. Elias approached, his tablet in hand, displaying the latest updates from Earth. The humans had completed their simulations and confirmed that the modifications to the palace systems and energy weapons were secure. "Everything is ready," he said quietly. "The council cannot challenge us, not directly. If we move now, we can reshape this palace entirely." Lyra nodded. "Then we act. But remember, we must appear calm, orderly, even compliant. The council must believe they still hold authority until the final moment. Perception is as important as control." The day began with ceremonial routines, designed to maintain the appearance of normalcy. Nobles moved through the grand halls, exchanging greetings, attending meetings, and issuing orders. Yet every action was subtly influenced by Lyra and Elias. Communications were rerouted, orders delayed, and rival council members nudged into conflict. The palace itself, once a symbol of alien dominance, now followed their subtle guidance. Lyra addressed Elias in a low voice. "We start with the council meeting. Every member must be present, every move anticipated. This is where the collapse becomes undeniable." They entered the council chambers, the room grand and imposing, filled with the alien aristocracy. The council members turned, expecting the usual formalities. They did not expect the quiet authority emanating from Lyra, or the calm competence of Elias. Lyra spoke first, her voice firm and unwavering. "Councilors, I have observed the recent inconsistencies within our palace systems. I have also reviewed the ancient blueprints and energy networks. It has become clear that these systems are vulnerable, more vulnerable than anyone assumed. I have secured them to prevent misuse, and the humans assisting me have confirmed safeguards are complete." A councilor rose, his translucent skin shimmering with indignation.
"You presume to lecture us, princess? You are paralyzed."
"You cannot command, you cannot control." Lyra's eyes did not waver. Physical ability is not the measure of control. Knowledge, strategy, and foresight are. You have underestimated both me and the humans assisting me, and now the consequences are apparent. The room fell silent. Murmurs of disbelief and anger swept through the council members. For the first time, they faced a power they could not intimidate with status or threat. Lyra's intellect, combined with Elias's human adaptability, had created a force they could not ignore. Elias stepped forward. "Counselors, humans have long been dismissed as weak, but we have proven that adaptability, creativity, and intelligence are formidable. The systems you relied on to maintain control are no longer beyond our understanding. The mistakes, conflicts, and errors you have experienced were influenced to show that underestimation has consequences." Duh. Shock spread through the council. Some attempted to argue, others tried to regain composure, but the unity of centuries was breaking. The fractures Lyra and Elias had cultivated now became obvious. Allies turned against one another, accusations flew, and for the first time the council was unable to maintain order. Lyra wheeled herself to the central console, connecting to the palace systems. Lights shifted, corridors sealed or opened as she guided, and the energy networks hummed under her control. Every aspect of the palace responded to her commands. The council realized too late that the supposed weaknesses of the princess and the human envoy had masked immense capability. Varel, the disgraced scientist, had returned to assist in this moment. He ensured that the energy systems were not just safe, but also under subtle control that allowed selective enforcement. Any attempt by the council to regain unilateral power would be blocked. Lyra and Elias had not just defended, they had gained leverage. The council's attempts at resistance failed. Plans were blocked, messages intercepted, and minor interventions neutralized. Every move was anticipated. The palace, once a fortress of alien authority, had become an instrument of human-guided strategy. One counselor, the same who had previously spoken against Lyra, attempted a final challenge. "You cannot command this palace, princess. You rely on tricks and human assistance." Lyra's response was calm, almost serene. "This palace responds to intelligence, foresight, and coordination. Tricks, if you will. But the results speak for themselves. You assumed that humans were weak and incapable. That assumption has failed you," Elias added, "and we will continue to demonstrate the strength humans bring. Not through brute force, but through understanding, adaptation, and planning. The galaxy will learn that underestimating humans is a mistake no species should make." The council's authority collapsed entirely. Some members fled in confusion. Others submitted reluctantly, realizing their positions had been undermined. Servants and aides, once cautious, now openly acknowledged Lyra and Elias's leadership. The palace had shifted almost overnight, from a symbol of alien arrogance to a center of calculated, intelligent command. Lyra wheeled herself back to the observation window, Elias beside her. "This is only the beginning," she said. "The council has seen what we are capable of, but the galaxy has not. The next step is to ensure that humans are recognized as capable, strategic, and influential. We cannot remain hidden forever." Elias smiled. "They have underestimated humans for centuries. Today that changed. With the council effectively neutralized, Lyra and Elias began restructuring the palace operations. Alliances were formed with forward-thinking nobles, while those resistant to change were sidelined. The palace systems were fully integrated under their guidance, ensuring that knowledge and intelligence determined authority rather than fear or brute strength. Humans, once dismissed, now held a respected role within the palace, their ingenuity proven. Lyra reached out to human engineers via secure channels. The modifications and insights from their collaboration were shared, providing Earth with a greater understanding of alien systems and technologies. The Council's plans to weaponize energy networks were neutralized, and safeguards ensured that Earth could defend itself should the need arise. The success of the operation had far-reaching implications. News of the events spread quietly through diplomatic channels. The aliens who had once dismissed humans were forced to recognize their intelligence, adaptability, and capacity for strategy. Lyra had demonstrated that leadership could come from intellect and vision, not just physical ability or status. Elias had proven that humans, underestimated and overlooked, could change the balance of power in subtle but undeniable ways. As the moons rose again over the gas giant, Lyra reflected on the journey. She had been dismissed, underestimated, and confined. Yet she had proven that true power lies not in muscle or privilege, but in knowledge, patience, and strategy. Elias, once a cautious envoy, had grown into a partner capable of navigating alien politics and adapting to unprecedented challenges. Together, they had rewritten the rules of the palace, demonstrating that humans could rise above expectation. The palace itself had become a symbol of this new order. No longer a fortress of arrogance, it was now a center where intelligence, collaboration, and foresight determined influence. Lyra's wheelchair, once seen as a limitation, now represented command, observation, and control. The council had learned a lesson they would never forget. Underestimating humans and a paralyzed princess was a fatal mistake. Lyra spoke softly, almost to herself. We have shown them what humans can do, but the galaxy still underestimates us. This is our beginning, not our end. Elias stood beside her, his expression one of pride and resolve. Then we continue, not to dominate, but to ensure that humans are recognized for what we can accomplish. The palace lights shimmered across the towers, reflecting the twin moons of the gas giant. Below, the stormy clouds swirled endlessly, indifferent to the events within, but inside, a quiet revolution had taken place. Lyra, the paralyzed princess, and Elias, the human envoy, had shown that intellect, strategy, and perseverance could overcome centuries of arrogance. They had not just survived. They had reshaped the balance of power and established a legacy that would be remembered across worlds. The council, the staff, and even the most skeptical observers now recognized a simple truth. Underestimation could no longer define humans or Lyra. What had begun as a subtle challenge had become a decisive demonstration of ability, foresight, and courage. The palace, and perhaps the galaxy, had been forever changed. Lyra and Elias looked out over the swirling storms of the gas giant. Side by side, they had achieved the impossible. The council was humbled, the palace secured, and humans recognized as capable partners. The story of the paralyzed princess who refused to be dismissed and the human who adapted, learned, and helped reshape a galactic power would echo far beyond these walls. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself a full smile. She had been underestimated, but she had turned every limitation into an advantage. She had proven that true strength comes not from the body, but from the mind, the heart, and the courage to act when others cannot see the possibilities. The future was uncertain, as all futures are. But for the first time, humans and Lyra were ready. They had shown that underestimation was a dangerous mistake, that intellect and strategy could triumph over arrogance, and that even those who seemed weak could shape the destiny of worlds. And as the moons glowed over the palace towers, Lyra and Elias knew that the galaxy had begun to learn a new lesson. Humans were not to be overlooked, and the paralyzed princess who refused to be powerless had become a force no one could ignore. The quiet storm they had begun months ago had become a gale. The palace was theirs, the council's arrogance broken, and the galaxy now had to reckon with the underestimated power of humans and the brilliance of Lyra. This was not the end. It was only the beginning of a new era, one where intellect, courage, and collaboration would determine the fate of worlds. And Lyra, the princess who had been dismissed, would be at the center of it all.